Over the last couple of months, the series has been a platform for over 1,000 participants exploring the acceleration of the clean energy transition in 3 end-use sectors: food systems, industry, and products. Now, as we mentioned yesterday, we did things a bit different this time around and have joined our 3 tracks into one extraordinary session touching upon the empowerment of youth and women to accelerate the energy transition. And today we're joined by an esteemed group of panelists to welcome you. Her Excellency, Ms. Leonore Gewessler, Minister of Climate Action, Environment, Energy, Mobility, Innovation, and Technology from Austria, has shared a few words with us. Although she couldn't be here, she has sent us a video. So without further ado, we launch today's session.
Welcome, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here with you today at the Vienna Energy Forum virtual series high-level segment. As host country and core partner, Austria highly values the Vienna Energy Forum. We continue to support its efforts and work in pushing the development and inclusive and sustainable solutions across the globe. The new year has only just begun, but we have plenty to do in 2021. Let us use this year to step up our efforts for climate action and to accelerate the energy transition. The energy transition is the engine which drives our economies out of the economic crisis after the COVID-19 pandemic. Being aware of the major transformations the energy world is going through, we need to rethink our energy systems and reinvent ourselves. We need to have the courage to change. Innovative energy technologies will be key. However, its large-scale deployment will require diverse and inclusive ways of thinking. To exploit its full potential, the renewable energy industry needs to make use of the entire talent pool. That is, to include the talents and voices of women, youth, minorities, and others who are often left outside, to fill its growing demand for skills. Today, the energy sector is still male-dominated, but studies have shown that women are increasingly attracted to renewables. Let us not miss this momentum for change. Engaging women and youth in the energy transition offers numerous co-benefits to the sector. By including them in the energy transition, we make sure that the future energy systems are fit for a modern society. As one of few female energy ministers worldwide, I'm hopeful that with the help of international cooperation, there will be many more young female energy leaders to follow. The increasing visibility of women in the renewable energy sector is highly welcome, but much more remains to be done, particularly in leadership positions. International solidarity between women is a key factor to empower women in energy. The Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition plays an active part in the empowerment process. Such international networks have my full support. It is when we come together and support one another that we can bring about societal change. The Austrian government has established a Girls' Day, an annual action day for young girls to increase their interest in jobs in science, technology, engineering, and math. The Austrian government has also put together a dedicated database of female experts in technology, including energy, called Femtech database of female experts. It's Austria's biggest database for female experts, with more than 2,000 females in 130 fields included. The database is a great source for private companies in finding suitable female experts. We have a collective responsibility for our world and for future generations. We believe in multilateralism. Therefore, Austria will continue to forge strong international energy partnerships by seeking dialogue and building consensus for effective cooperation. I look forward to hearing your ideas on how we can overcome existing barriers that women and young people face in accessing the energy sector. Always keep in mind, the best way to predict the future of energy is by shaping it. I wish you all the best and a lot of success for this meeting.
So after such an empowering opening, we continue with today's program. It is my great honor to introduce Mr. Lee Young, Director General of UNIDO. We're letting him in the platform. Mr. Young, thank you for being with us. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very pleased to join you today at our first session of the Vienna Energy Virtual Forum on Equity, Youth and Gender in Driving the Energy Transition. As a gender champion and a believer in the vast potential of youth in our climate change endeavors, we are starting 2021 on the right footing. Women continue to experience vast socio-economic inequalities amidst high unemployment among youth, particularly in developing countries. With less than 10 years in the lead up to 2030, there's no time to lose. We cannot afford to continue to miss out on the large flow of the world's creativity, innovation, and the enthusiasm for change. Colleagues, friends, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated gender and age inequalities in society, especially when it comes to the energy access. We must intensify our efforts and work together better to enable women and the youth to play their critical role in driving the energy transition. As we accelerate sustainable solutions to the world's biggest challenges, from poverty and gender inequality to climate change. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, globally, the 789 million people still lack access to energy, while 2.8 billion people rely on polluting cooking fuels that endanger personal and public health as well as the environment. Due to economic inequalities and detrimental social norms, women and children bear the brunt of such energy poverty. Access to energy is critical in driving socio-economic development. For example, there's evidence to show that electrification helps to increase women's economic empowerment and the labor market participation. On the other hand, young people represent a mighty force that has the potential to bring about change. Providing youth with opportunity to effect change will catalyze meaningful actions to secure a better future for them. With around 1.2 billion young people around the world, through an enabling environment, they can help us to shape our future as innovators, entrepreneurs, consumers, and policymakers to lead needed transformation change in the energy sector. It is therefore vital to ensure that they have the appropriate skills and a conducive environment to drive the energy transformation. And the pandemic has provided many examples of effective women and youth leadership in response to crisis. This momentum should be utilized to promote women and youth as leaders, innovators, and agents of change to support energy transition. And Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, at the UNIDO, we have seen the benefits of aligning industrial development with low carbon pathways while promoting the empowerment of the women and the youth. We know that industry plays a vital role for climate change mitigation and adaptation, and we are proud to be able to provide the support to our member states in their effort to address economic shocks and promote the green industry policies and practices for a more sustainable future. The future post-pandemic energy system must be gender inclusive and empower the youth. The international community has a vital role in driving a sustainable, inclusive energy, clean energy transition to combat climate change. Gender responsive technical cooperation and policy and the inclusion of women and the youth in decision-making are prerequisites for that. Guided by our ambitious gender policy, UNIDO is committed to empowering women, men, and the youth to accelerate the achievement of the 2030 agenda. The support from member states and the partners such as Austrian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Austrian Development Agency, and the EASA enable us to work together towards a more resilient, inclusive, and sustainable future for all. Drawing from our experience, the resounding message is very clear. We must work together in the following three ways. Number one, to make the benefits and opportunities of sustainable, inclusive, clean energy transition visible. Number two, to create responsive policies and programs that will tackle the barriers and unlock the potential of women and the youth. And finally, to equip women and the youth with the skills needed to drive the transition. I hope that our discussions during this forum will lead us to achieve our ambition to bring about a sustainable energy transition that leaves no one behind. I'm very happy that today's event with the participation with high-level ministers and also high-level participants to contribute to this forum. I'm also very happy I saw my colleague from IEA and also from other organizations also join this important event. I wish all of you a productive discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Young, for such stimulating words. They will certainly ring with us in today's discussion, and they are a great introduction to the topic of today. So thank you for your intervention.
Thank you.
So to set the tone for the high-level discussion, we would like to present a brief video that summarizes yesterday's session. It featured our gender and youth champions in 4 breakout rooms, exploring future-proof skills and enabling environment for youth and gender. So please enjoy.
So we're saying that since women are at the center of a lot of these challenges, let us build a network where women are no longer bearing the brunt of these challenges, but are flipping it over and now become the solution provider. So these are women who by themselves will be the first point of call for using this clean energy products, and then they are able to share the solutions with their communities and sell the solutions to their community. So
we, the youth, have to be included in the green transition. And it's time not just for us to be told, hey, this is what you need to do. No, it's time for us to actually be included in the discussions. Then we can actually say the globe or Africa or other continents can transcend into a green energy future without leaving the growing population behind.
Gender diversity, equality, and inclusion in the clean energy transition is not just a women's issue. It's also about redefining the role that men play in acting on gender equality in ways that build men leaders to step up besides women and encourage them to adopt high impact actions within their organizations and across the sector.
On creating an enabling environment for youth towards accelerating clean energy transition. And the key recommendation from that breakout room session was getting involved. It has to get to a point where youths are involved in the policy making and in decision making processes in the clean energy space. So this can drive in the active participation of other youths in the sector. Thank you very much.
First of all, it's everyone's issue. So involving men is necessary to achieve gender equality. Secondly, we need to work throughout the life cycle of women, i.e. we need to start early. Thirdly, we need to ensure clarity of concepts to avoid misinterpretation. Fourth, metrics are important. To manage it, we need to measure it. And fifth, positioning working in the energy sector on energy transition has to be positioned more as a purpose-driven choice, which will attract more women to the sector and make the difference. And last but not least, we need organizations to commit to actionable gender equality goals and targets and measure it, to hold them accountable for failing the commitments on the one hand, but maybe more importantly, to celebrate as well the ones who achieved it and communicate and disseminate this type of best practices to inspire others to follow.
5 takeaway messages. 1. There is a mismatch between what the education sector is offering and what the energy job market is demanding. 2. Soft skills are essential future-proof skills for youth. 3. Let us consider education as an investment, not a cost. 4. Let us foster equal opportunities for all in the energy transition. And 5, there is still room for technological innovation So young people out there, make your move.
So, to start today's discussion, I would like to introduce the moderators, Ms. Irene Guiner-Reichel from the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition, and Ms. Pasi Amayo Okoya from the SDG 7 Youth Constituency. So we're letting them in the platform. Hi, Pasi, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And Irene is here. Hi, Irene, welcome. So ladies, I give you the floor. Thank you for joining.
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, it's a great honor and great pleasure to co-moderate this very interesting session with my colleague Pasi Amayo from the Youth Constituency of SDG 7. I am Irene Guiner-Reichel. I'm the pro bono president of the Global Women's Network for the Energy Transition. And we have discussed among the moderators how we will divide the work. So I will take the first part of our discussion forward, and then Pasi will take the second. And I'm a bit more representing the women's side of the discussion, and Pasi is a bit more representing the youth side of the discussion. But as we can see, and as we have heard from the introductory videos already, there is a lot of dovetailing, of course, also a lot of different approaches that are needed. We have an amazing panel, and I am also very aware of the constraints of time. So after the two very inspiring introductory messages by the Austrian Minister Leonore Gewessler and the Director General of UNIDO, Lyon, I do not want really to rehash what they have said already, because I think the messages came across very clear, as did the videos from yesterday's amazing discussion. So let us delve directly in the moderated conversation with our amazing panel. The panelists, I trust, are in the room by now. I cannot see them actually.
I believe the panelists are there, and I think our organizers will be letting them in shortly.
Yes. They're all coming. Yes, wonderful. Excellent. So we are still waiting for a couple of the panelists to join. And I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all the panelists who are going to engage in this discussion. They come from the highest levels of government, international organizations, diplomacy, regional organizations, and also from the private sector. We are still waiting for representatives from the Youth Advisory Group, and I believe also from Italy. But since we are very pressed for time, I propose that we are starting with the conversation. And in this sense, I would like to turn with my first question to His Excellency Alejandro Solano, Ambassador and Permanent Representative of Costa Rica to Austria. And I would like to ask him, well, after everything that we have heard in the introductory messages, but also after everything that we know from our studies, from international reports, from our life experiences, about the benefits of involving women and youth in all things sustainable. What are the key barriers and challenges that women and youth are still facing in the context of sustainable energy in your region, in your country, and what hinders them in leading equally and being the agents of change that we all know they can be. And as you address, dear Mr. Ambassador, this question, could I kindly also recall that all the answers should be very brief so that we can have a real conversation, and definitely should not exceed 3 minutes if at all possible. Ambassador, could I ask you to take to get us going in this conversation?
Thank you, Mrs. Gana. And it's a great pleasure to be here as a gender champion. For me, it's an honor. I'm very pleased to participate in this first event of the year, and Happy New Year for all. Well, regarding, in order to save the time, I would like to make some comments, and especially trying to highlight and point out this issue. I would like that to think that probably if we make an assessment of the main problems that the women and youth face in terms of to try to be more proactive in terms of energy transition, we need to consider mainly two main situations. First, and especially I'm speaking the current situation in my country, but probably is a worldwide situation, is first of all is the problem that women and youth faces in terms of poverty, discrimination, violence, absence of working or studying opportunities, difficulties to access digital technologies, or gender inequality, especially for those more vulnerable groups as indigenous rural areas, that hinders them in leading and the participation that they have in this process. But also, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic is now the big challenge for the international community, especially for the impact in particular process like the SDGs. Taking into account this very brief assessment of the current situation, I would like to highlight three main areas in which my country has been working on. The first one is the launch of the National Decarbonization Plan for the years 2018-2050 that aims at the decarbonized economy with net zero emissions by 2050, that include 10 decarbonization axes and various cross-cutting strategies comprising one in inclusion, human rights, and promotion of gender equality. This is a roadmap for a new development model, which is designed to tackle the main challenge in the world economy faces. This strategy is very interesting because we include the 3 Ds: digitalization, decentralization, and decarbonization, and aims to provoke deep change in the Costa Rican society and to make sure that no one is left behind in this process. The second issue, the second area that I would like to highlight is the international commitments and the international initiatives. More recently, just a couple of days ago in the One Planet Summit, my country, jointly with France and UK, has launched the new very ambitious strategy called High Ambitious Coalition for Nature and People, that the aim is to encourage the international community to negotiate and to promote a new agreement to protect at least the 30% of the world land and oceans by 2030. I think it's a very interesting initiative, and of course, we are in the process to encourage and invite on the main stage, especially for the impact for the women and the youth and the future generations. And the third element that I would like to highlight is the different actions that my government has been encouraged in terms of the implementation of the SDGs, especially those related to the women and youth. And I would like to highlight 2 main issues. One is the access to education for girls, adolescents, and women in the teens, in order to promote the proper insertion and especially to fight against the non-discrimination of the women and youth in these areas. And the second is to try to exercise the land tenure rights, especially for women in rural areas and indigenous communities, and actions to ensure their adequate and independent participation in process. With these ideas, I would like to finally finish saying that even that my country produced the 99% of its energy from clean, sustainable sources, we are in the process to promote a new relevant initiative in order to increase the participation of the different sectors of the society in this particular segment of our development, into consideration that women and youth can play a very important role in maintaining this very high average of clean, sustainable energy production. Thank you very much for this first round.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much for sharing the very impressive steps that your government are doing, and it's really very encouraging to see the commitment that you yourself and your whole administration has to move things forward in a sustainable direction. Let us jump from Central America to Western Asia. And could I ask you, Ms. Rolly Dashti, Executive Secretary from the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia, to give us your take on the challenges, the barriers, the hinderings that are in the way of women and youth leading for sustainable energy, and of course also what your organization is doing to address them. Please, you have the floor. Ms. Rolly Dashti? I cannot hear you. Can you
hear me?
Yes, now it works. Yes.
Can you
yes,
hear me
please
now?
go. Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to this high-level plenary session to discuss a very important and reshaping issue for our future. I think green technology and access to clean energy is extremely important. And one of the important issues that has been raised, and unfortunately the Arab region lacks, is the issue of mainstreaming, national mainstreaming sustainable energy strategies. We're still not having a mainstreaming energy strategy to go from top to down. So policies, there is a lack of absence of policies that moves forward green technology adoptions. Having said this, I will go into the macro level and look into what that means and impact women. As you are all aware, when we talk about adoption of green technologies, it means we will have the infrastructure needs to be there. And having the infrastructure costs money. And it is expensive to have this upfront investment. And this is where the upfront investment, it is an expensive upfront investment for women to adopt these new technologies. So access to finance to adopt for these new technologies becomes a very important issue. And it's a key challenge and barrier for women to adopt green technologies implementation. The second issue is that because there is no mainstream national strategies, so people knowledge and information about the benefit that is brought about by adopting new technologies is absent. And the difference in how much improvement in your livelihood and how much opportunity to improve your quality of life and income and reduction of inequality does become absent in the mindset of the people who want to adopt this new technology. So this is very important. So because we need to start, as we have heard and heard previously, is the mindset shift. We need to have a mindset shift, and it doesn't come only, but it needs to have national policy efforts to have these mindset shifts on the adoption of new technology and the benefit of the new technology in terms of even it's a bridging the gap of inequality in that sense. A third thing which is extremely important, even if there is the infrastructure, even if there is the investment in the infrastructure of green technology, you need to have the technical skills and the knowledge to implement these technologies. And when we're talking about women, and as we know, women in the STEM field, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, are being is limited. Yes, they are rising in our region, but still it's not rising enough. And then we still have to talk about, when we talk about rural women, where the majority of the rural women, they have a limited educational level, then there has to be a very huge investment to be made on capacity building and capacity development in the adoption of the green technology that it's being used for women and for youth. And especially when we're talking about geographic spaces and when we're talking about leave no one behind. So we need to focus on the disadvantaged women also in the rural areas. That is extremely important, and this is a big challenge for them. The fourth thing is adoption of green technology and creating businesses and innovation and entrepreneurs needs people to have also skills in business and green technology businesses adoption and creating access to markets for them in the adoption of these technologies and the ecosystem that has to be encouraging ecosystem so that we have a proper investments in this and rewards where we can reduce the income increase the income of women and make them less vulnerable in their livelihood. I need to, the fourth big major challenge is that we are in a region that not only is encountering COVID-19 like everybody else globally, okay, but also we are a region which has a lot of economic crisis, and also which our region is full of conflicts, but also are a big challenges. Sustainability, stability is extremely important for any adoption to make it as a priority adoption for green technologies issues in that regard. The third thing is that also we do have economies in our region that are dependent on fossil fuel, and the income generated is from fossil fuel, a good portion. And now that transitions from fossil fuels to green technology, green energy, and clean energy is a transition that these economies need to do by decoupling their economies from dependency on a fossil fuel and seeing that they are an energy economies, not a fossil fuel economies. And the transition of the thinking, and that's what, as the minister have said, we need to reinvent ourselves and rethink. And this also a big challenge is to rethink by being a fossil fuel economy vis-a-vis an energy economy. And that transition becomes, and this is a big challenge that we think. So there is challenges at the macro level and the policy level and creating the ecosystems, and there is challenges at the micro levels of adoption of entrepreneurship, improving the women livelihood and the youth into it. Thank you. Over.
Irene, you seem to be muted. I'm so sorry. We can hear you now. Maybe try again.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Is it now? Yeah. Sorry, the tricks of the technology here. Thank you so much, Rola Dashti, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia. Your very concrete points, I think, already give us many elements for the call to action that is going to happen a little later on, and also your last point, the need to start rethinking not just in terms of individual installations, individual small solutions for households, towns, municipalities, etc., but that we need to really think to transition from economies that are based on fossil fuels to economies that are based on sustainable energy. And that, I think, builds a very nice bridge to the next distinguished speaker. I would like to invite Director General of the International Atomic Energy, Rafael Mariano Grossi, to put in his views on this issue. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Madam General Eichel. It's a pleasure to participate together with my colleagues and friends this very fascinating debate. I should be remiss if I had not thank also and the Minister Wexler from the Austrian government for framing this discussion. I would say from our perspective, the perspective of the IAEA is a very specific one and very relevant to the topic, because of course we are an organization that is in direct relationship with one source of energy and one part of the solution to the decarbonization of the economy, which is of course nuclear energy. What we can contribute to this debate is the experience, the concrete experience and the initiatives we are taking. I think the scenario has been set, and we fully share and agree with the diagnostic and the description of the situation and the barriers that do exist. Our conviction is that this is no longer time of advocacy, it's time of action, and to show what we are really doing. We all know that the barriers that exist, we all know the frustrations that exist, we all know the injustice that has been done. Enough with that, I would say. I think it's a time to say what we are doing concretely now. So here we have a very interesting combination of things. On the one hand, we have at the macro level, of course, the issue of climate action. And what to do to move from the situation where we are now, which is still heavily dependent on fossil fuels and a highly carbonized economy, to something else. But the particular perspective of this forum series is to see how we make this process more efficient, more fair, more correct, by injecting, of course, the new generations through the participation of the young people, and of course the participation of women. So let me say a couple of things about our particular take in the case of the IAEA. The IAEA, you may know, is an agency that has a promotional side, of course, but also takes care of capacity building in many countries. All of our members, more than 170 members, in how they perform their activities in the nuclear energy field, but also in nuclear sciences and applications. As you may know, our field of action is very vast and goes beyond generating kilowatts or megawatts for the grids. And it has to do with nuclear medicine, with food security, with a number of things. Of course, the pandemic and the work we are carrying out there with nuclear techniques. Education is crucial in this, and it has this double angle that the series is trying, I guess, to address, because education per se basically looks at the future generations, and it should make sure that women are always included. So I wanted to mention, and of course we would love to have the support of the rest of the community, yourselves included, in a program where we are supporting secondary school teachers, not only at the levels that you could see or suspect that are closer to working with us or working in the energy field. Why is this so? Because we believe that we have a very serious structural problem. And as any structural problem, one has to attack it from the very roots. Seeing how you can gradually transform the situation into a new, which goes beyond the palliative degree. So at the moment, we are working with teachers in almost 20 countries in Asia and the Pacific, and we are going to be doing the same in Africa. And in so doing, we are introducing, of course, we are the IAEA, all right? So we have our own area. We are working on the introduction of nuclear and isotopic science in their curricula, showing the things that can be done. This initiative aims to reach 1 million students aged from 12 to 18 in 2021. So we are trying to have something that could have a real impact, introducing this science into the education of young students, including girls, of course, and they can understand the role of nuclear science applications and nuclear energy as well. The other important thing that I would like to mention, there are lots of things we could talk about, but I wanted really to highlight the very concrete examples that we can show, perhaps not only to show what we, the IAEA, does, but could serve as an inspiration for others and a good idea for others. We have, this year, I have introduced a specific fellowship program called, quite obviously, the Marie Sklodowska-Curie, this incredibly admirable woman that was breaking new ground more than 100 years ago. So the idea, and this is not only an initiative, we are already working on this. We have established a fellowship for young women all over the world. We have already given 100 scholarships to technologists, researchers, and scientists, women, from more than 70 countries. In this way, of course, they will be able to be having a real opportunity, real, in front of them.
Could I ask you to please wrap up a little bit, because we are very pressed for time and there are more speakers.
Stop here by telling you that we are working on education, not only in education, we are working in afterwards, basic education, almost basics, secondary school. We are working also in giving opportunities by providing fellowships to students. And of course, the obvious thing is the issue of the representation of more women at the ranks of the agency, with a commitment by me to reach parity in 2025. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And apologies, it's horrible when I have to do this, but
I fully understand. Apologies.
Thank you very much. Let me then now turn back to a region where energy is one of the big challenges, still access to energy and sustainable energy. Let me ask you, dear Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy at the African Union Commission, what your take is on the question that we discussed. And I hate to repeat, but we have to be very short so that everybody gets a chance to say their word. Please go ahead, Madam.
Hello, everyone, and very honored to join this distinguished panel. Before being a politician, I was engineer, so I would be very brief and straight to the point. Of course, when we talk about Africa, we're talking about 55 countries. So generalization has to be is not fair to the continent. We do have on the continent, of course, I mean, a serious problem about access to energy and reliable access to energy. And sub-Saharan Africa, about 600 million Africans still do not have access to electricity. 800 do not have access to clean cooking. And this goes beyond being a developmental issue or an economic issue. This is a moral issue. So in this day and age, 21st century, we're still talking about women and children having to gather biomass or firewood for cooking and inhale the smokes, and or young and old and women and men who do not have access to electricity. So it's a very serious problem. Having said that, I'm very proud of our region because despite the enormous challenge, the region has been steadily increasing the access to energy and has been very serious in including and making sure that this access is also inclusive and transiting into greener energy. Into greener energy because we are benefiting from the vast resources that the continent is having, whether it's solar, hydro, geothermal, wind, but also from the fact that the prices of the technology prices, you know, for renewable energies are coming down, so they're becoming competitive, and which makes it more affordable to our countries to embrace. Now, we are having, of course, with regard to women, I did talk about the cooking, clean cooking, and clean cooking when it's not just about not having access to these technologies, but or to clean energy, but also the fact that it's the opportunities lost, whether it's education, whether it's economic activities for women and men. And as for youth, because I have to talk about youth, there is, and now more than ever, there is the nexus digital and energy that has to be talked about. The fact that digitalization, which is the infrastructure of the 21st century, relies primarily on energy. So the fact that there is no energy also prevents our youth use their full potential in this in these fantastic possibilities that are offered by technology. And they are mutually reinforcing digitalization and energy, because digitalization is also offering new possibilities and new ways of tackling the energy issues through mini and off-grid solutions using digital payments and so on and so forth, which can help bridge the poverty, the energy poverty gap, and allow the deployment in a very good way to particularly to rural and remote areas. Other hindrances facing women is also the male dominance of the sector, and I'm talking here about across the value chain, the whole value chain. And you would notice, even if you review all my any intervention that I've done anywhere in the world, I never talk about women, gender-sensitive programs for women as only women recipients of services or recipients of energy. But I'm talking about women in the value chain. Where are the women entrepreneurs owning the large companies working in energy? Where are the women heads of large programs for energy in implementing these large projects that are taking place everywhere, and especially in our continent? So in addition to a large number of programs that we are implementing across the continent, regional and continental, we have established a network for women in infrastructure in Africa, so as to promote also women entrepreneurship, women access to large finance, not mini finance or microfinance, large finance to implement infrastructure and energy projects, and promoting women as decision makers and at the center of the policies about infrastructure energy. So that is, and really proud of that. Africa has a large number of ministers of energy, and also a very good number of women entrepreneurs in infrastructure, including young women providing, Egypt has now the Ben Ban power plant, which is the second or the largest in the world. There are women who are enterprises that are providing and working, as part of the promoters, not only the promoters, the implementers of that big project. Maybe I cannot help myself, but maybe to differ a little bit with, or to give another perspective from what Ms. Dashti said, because she said Arab world, and in Africa we have a large number also of Arab countries. We have Arab countries that are oil and gas producers, like Egypt. Even with that, 40% of energy in Egypt, I mean, it's already 100% coverage, but 40% share of renewables in Egypt in 2025. And as I said, has the largest solar power plant. Morocco, a consumer of fossil fuel, has also the same target, about 40% in 2025. And I am really honored to have implemented, which until this year was the largest solar power plant in Morocco. So our countries are taking the matter of renewable energy very seriously, whether they are producers of fossil fuel or whether they are consumers of fossil fuel. And the African Union, at the policy and the political levels, the programs, for instance, the African Renewable Energy Initiative to produce about 300 gigawatt from renewable sources, the program for infrastructure development in Africa, which is yesterday was adopted by the ministers. Now, a large programs are renewable energy, and the selection of the whole program, regardless of energy, we focus. We looked at each project with a gender lens for procurement, because we want to make sure that in procurement, women-owned and women-led enterprises are part of the value chain, and I insist on that point. In addition to that, there are, of course, the softer elements, which are the inclusion of women in STEM, in decision making, in defining the pathways for transition to renewables. So a large number of programs, but it's true that in Africa, things are still problematic for women, but one is very much hopeful and encouraged by the vast and large steps that are being undertaken on the continent. And I thank you.
Thank you very much. Very passionate presentation that shows us how many possibilities there are. I would like to ask as the next speaker, Ms. Barbara Frey, but before she takes the floor, I would like to welcome very warmly to our group also Undersecretary Alessandra Tode from the Ministry for Economic Development of Italy. Thank you very much for joining us, and I'll give you the floor after Barbara, so that you can listen in a little bit to our conversation before being put on the spot. Barbara, as a representative of the private sector, I think your views are very important. Ms. Barbara Frey is Executive Vice President of Europe Operations and member of the Executive Committee of Schneider Electric. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. So I really talk now from the perspective as a European and as a female engineer. So I've worked in the energy sector since almost 30 years. And when we now look at the plan that Europe has set up with the Green Deal and becoming a carbon neutral continent by 2050, there is a lot to do. And it's not only about renewables, it's also about energy efficiency. For instance, when we look at our building stock here in Europe, there is a big potential to take out energy and to be more efficient. And we can only do this through digitalization. So there is a big demand locally in Europe for a lot of engineers, be it mechanical engineers, be it electrical engineers, be it IT people, and so on. Now, when we look at the engineers which are graduating in Europe, you will see there is a minority of women there. And I would say that it's a bit, in principle, threefold on this. And this is now really my own personal experience and also the experience of my daughter, which is also an energy engineer. So first of all, I think there is not enough emphasis during our education, and this education, from my point of view, starts already at the age of 10, to really bring in the importance of energy, how important this is, what is the potential that we can really do there. And one of the reasons why I've chosen the profession I have today was because when I was 10 years old, my teacher came to me and said, hey, look, energy price in Europe is very high. The oil price at that time, it was at $39 the barrel. Now we need to save energy. How are we going to do this? And as a team in the class, we were looking at different possibilities, and that attracted me to the topic. Now the second thing, of course, is then also the encouragement. So I had parents which were very much encouraging me to become an engineer, to go really into a technical science. And I know a lot of other parents who were not at all encouraging their daughters to do these kind of things. So this is very helpful. And then the third element, which should not be underestimated, is to have then an employer who really wants to hire women. And when I was hired at that time by a company, you have to see, I was pregnant with my second child. And I said, hey, guys, I want to work part-time. And still they took me in, and I think they didn't regret it. So there was a door opening to me in a relatively special situation, but the employer was open enough to really take me on board. And this is what we do in Schneider Electric nowadays a lot. So we do very structured program where we want to bring young people in, young women also. So like we have a program where we do a competition in 165 countries around the world, where we attract young people and specifically women to compete, to bring in ideas. And these are the new potential, let's say, talents we are going to bring into the company. So we are also measuring very much our managers, how many women, how many young talents are you bringing in? And without those measures, nothing would really move, because a lot of us are very much biased. Usually we look for same. The older we get, the same age as we are. And we are not looking really at younger talents. So I think we can do a lot, and it is very much the willingness to change things. You can do a lot of regulations. I'm not, let's say, a big fan of making quotas, because in the end, a manager or a leader in a company has to be convinced this is the right way, and we need, and I just have to emphasize it again, and I'm talking maybe also for the world, we need female engineers to come in, otherwise we are not going to cope with the challenges we have ahead of us.
Very much, Barbara. Thank you. That was a very clear message, also very concise. Let me now turn to Ms. Alessandra Tode, Undersecretary, Ministry for Economic Development of Italy. You're going to be the last speaker of this first question on the barriers, the challenges, but also the possibilities to bring in more women and more youth into the sustainable energy transition. Dear Madam Undersecretary, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. The promotion of women participation in the clean energy transition is followed since 2010 in the framework of Clean Energy Ministerial Multilateral Forum through the Clean Energy Education and Empowerment C3E initiative. As highlighted in 2019 status report on gender equality in the energy sector, issued by the mentioned initiatives, where Italy is the leader for knowledge and data collection team, women face challenges at every stage of their career in non-traditional occupations, such as those found within the energy sector. The first activity in order to pursue women empowerment was to mapping gender diversity in the energy sector, since there was limited gender disaggregated data regarding the energy sector and inadequate knowledge about how to make the sector more gender balanced. The work done so far was to have a solid understanding of the sector panorama. Based on C3E collected data, in the public sector, women encounter barriers in the decision-making process, where they have to face low percentage of representation in political stances related to energy. While in the private sector, women are underrepresented in senior executive positions and on board of directors. In industry associations, which play a fundamental role in guiding policy choices by providing a collective voice for stakeholders, women are often poorly represented. The gender gap often starts well before women and men entering the workforce. In education and research, when we look at graduating in STEM fields of study, men make up the majority. The reports have shown that multi-level barriers existed during recruitment, retention, promotion, advancement and leadership levels. For instance, in recruitment, women continue to face a disadvantage in accessing information, not only about non-traditional sectors such as oil, gas and energy, but also within the renewable energy sector. Careers in the energy sector are generally not being pitched to women through formal channels, such as career counselors, student employment advisors, job centers, recruitment sessions, and career fairs. In retention, most departures, resignation and dismissals in non-traditional occupations appear to occur within the 5 first years of employment. Therefore, women's experience how they are welcome and treated and whether they are supported and promoted during the time are critical. Some research provided that women are mostly likely to exit the workforce after 2 or more maternity leaves. This may explain why women without caregiving responsibilities and those who enter work at a later stage in their lives after completing parent roles are more likely to remain in that sector. With reference to promotion, advancement and leadership, there are still persistent barriers to addressing women's underrepresentation in senior executive positions and on board of directors of energy companies. Most companies remain more willing to adopt voluntary board diversity policies than to adopt targets for proportion of women serving as directors of executive officers. So I can speak as Undersecretary of the Minister of Economic Development, but also as an engineer and women that work in the private sector of energy for 20 years. There is really a lot of work that we still have to do.
Much, Madam Undersecretary, and I trust that you will be very much a force for change in your country, and together with all the other panelists and many others who listen to us in the forthcoming call to action, there will be many opportunities to concretize what can be done and how we can strengthen the actions of each one of us here. I'm aware that I'm running over time. I don't want to cut more into Pasi's time. My apologies to Vladislav, who had also prepared an intervention for this first portion of the dialogue, but perhaps, Vladislav, you can take it up when you make your intervention in the youth segment and bring in the Corona perspective very specifically. So with my apologies to Pasi, over to you.
No worries, and thank you so much, Irene, and all the panelists. A very informative and encouraging session to look forward to in the near future, especially when it comes to sustainable energy. So thank you very much for those interventions that were made in this first segment of this high-level session. To mention that it was interesting as I was listening to the panelists speaking about the challenges and barriers. It was so beautiful the way it was going straight into how they're supporting different initiatives and women and youth within their organization and within their country. So Irene, a segment of the second part has already been covered, which makes it very easy for us to transition more into the final questions. But just for the sake of opportunity, especially to include the voice of the youth, I want to maybe give an opportunity to Vladislav Kaim to just kind of give us from a youth perspective, what has been the impact of the coronavirus to young people globally, and also just kind of link that to the question I'm going to be asking in the second segment. What are some of the recommendations that you believe should be prioritized in terms of action for the youth now between the 12 and 18 months that are coming up, especially in closing the gaps when it comes to inclusive climate action and inclusive green recovery that leaves no one, including young girls and the youth in general, behind? I think I'll give you the opportunity, as we have not heard your voice, and then we will move on to the final segment. So Vlad, you have your 2 minutes to speak. Vlad, are you with us?
Yeah, I can hear you now. The only thing is that my signal is a little patchy. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Kindly, you have the floor.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you very much. And before I dive into this question, I can't pass by for my attention this fact that unfortunately we see that in a session that is in its first word dedicated to youth, we see only 2 youth representatives out of 9, which have the opportunity to take the word only 1 hour and 5 minutes after its start. And while I don't believe that this is, essentially malign by itself by design, this pattern, unfortunately, can be seen in many other international fora where most of the adult people come in at panels about youth and talk significant measure about futures of youth, even prior they go and listen to the actual youth. And that's also a reason why many youth unfortunately feel that their international and even local sometimes platforms for engagements on the issues regarding energy policy, especially during COVID, when in-person meetings are not a possibility, are simply not representing them. And while wider youth constituencies like SDG 7 youth constituency, who in Pas's person is represented here and is doing a great job in bringing the voices of the youth to the policymakers, we have seen during the COVID times that unfortunately the pattern of patronizing attitude towards youth inputs in energy policies is being kept going. And what does that mean? What I mean by that is that there is an attitude of we are caring, about youth, our future, while ignoring the fact that youth is already present, and they are already there with the capacity as professionals, eager to be heard as equals, to present and participate with their inputs as equals, and that simply is not happening. When it comes to more localized impacts of COVID on the youth and energy, of course, we need to take into account 2 sides of the coin: youth who are participating in activities related to energy production process and energy consumption. When it comes to the consumption, we have seen that, for instance, in countries that were already prone to, for instance, quite high inflation, or that were significantly dependent on oil revenues, and hence the households, including young ones, were dependent on energy subsidies. We have seen the energy costs rising because the budget revenues were significantly going down, and hence, in order to balance the books, certain types of subsidies had to go first. And unfortunately, both their existence and their elimination has extremely regressive impact fiscally down the line, and young households in this regard are bearing the brunt of it. Also, when it comes to energy access, we have noticed those disparities becoming more and more acute, and now they're actually costing lives because access to energy can make the difference between a medical intervention that can save a youth's life from COVID or not, just to bring as an example. When it comes to impact that is made by COVID on the fate of youth who is employed in energy, we can see that the fellow youth who were employed in oil and gas sector has been significantly hit. Because the demand for oil and the things that happen with the price of oil and particularly in April, even though there has been some recovery, we can notice with a pretty high degree of likelihood and certainty that the recovery of said demand will never reach the levels we've seen before, and hence it triggered a whole wave of cuts in capex and opex at the same time. And obviously the young specialists were on the front line of layoffs. And those people, many of them most likely will never be able to come again. And they need proper resources for retraining in order to assure that they have a career with their skills in climate positive sectors, particularly in renewable energy, of course. And finally, I would also like to draw attention upon the youth who is not maybe working as I said, in the sectors that are like oil and gas and coal, but those who are living in the communities where significant part of economic life and production and even regional, local identity is dependent on coal production or oil or steel or other industries that are evolving around fossil fuel energy sources. If we are not offering them a way out in terms of help, how they can build up their skills in a way that they will be applicable in the local communities with help towards a green recovery post-COVID, we will see another wave of dying communities all around the world, both in developed and developing countries. And the last but not the least is that we need to make sure that we zoom in not just on youth as employees or consumers, but also as entrepreneurs, particularly in the developing countries. Because in the developed countries, we have seen that there is an opportunity to borrow money at a massive scale at zero rates. And then, by the way, speaking of how the government spend them, waste nearly half of them, equal to $250 billion on fossil fuel subsidies. But when it comes to countries like countries in sub-Saharan Africa, in South Asia, even in my home region of Eastern Europe, for young entrepreneurs, especially who are operating on micro scale, the shock that came from the financial point of view with COVID for their businesses, for their ventures, is essentially equal to what a human experiences in a cardiac arrest. And we need to make sure that these effects are also properly accounted for. And at this point, I think I will stop and hand it back to Pasi, since I believe the second question will be tackled a little later.
Yes, thank you so much. And also in the spirit of keeping time, we're running out of time. So I want to maybe just encourage us to go through the final segment of this panel discussion, maybe just to give an opportunity to all our panelists, maybe just 1 minute each, to kind of give us what your recommendations are, especially what we should prioritize in terms of actions in the next couple of months in closing the gaps for inclusive climate action and inclusive green recovery that leaves no one behind. So maybe I will start, bring the conversation back to Mr. Alejandro Solano, ambassador from from Costa Rica, sorry. You seem to be on mute, sir. We don't get your sound. Maybe try again. No.
You hear
yes.
me? Okay.
Yes, now we can hear you.
Perfect. Sorry. Well, I will try to answer you in less than 1 minute. I think that the problem is clear that the women and youth agenda for the states is very broad. So certainly there are many areas in which one state can work. In our case, we are in the process to try to reinforce and foster several actions aimed to increase the participation of the women and the youth in the economic recovery process. Certainly the impact of the women and the youth and through by the pandemic has been very strong, and well, several measures, especially in the economic, sanitary, and social fields, aim to try to foster once again the role of the women and the youth in the economic and productive process. But as well, it's very important to try to maintain the youth in the educational system. As several speakers have said, one of the main problems it's now the educational system that has excluded many students due to the difficulties that the states are facing in order to maintain the educational system working under normal conditions. The access to the financial support is very important, especially for the projects aimed to foster the role of the women, especially the most vulnerable women in the rural area, vulnerable groups as indigenous or Afro-descendant women. I think is very important as well in our case. And finally, I would like to highlight that in that line, we are recently decided to promote one very interesting project that aims to foster the role of the women in the society. And it's called the footprint of our future, that the aim is to try to recover fully through the reforestation and restoration in the north of the country, or the several areas that implied the planting of 200,000 different native trees species. And it's going to try to increase the participation of the women in the administration of these several areas, because certainly the linkage between the climate change and the role of the women in this process of recovery will be fundamental. So this is a very concrete case that we are promoting internationally. We think that the role of the international organization as well to provide support to states in these cases, not only through the financial support, but as well as the technical cooperation, will be fundamental in this process of recovery. I think that with these very quick ideas, I complete my round. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that intervention and for giving us the recommendation. Maybe I'm going to ask the next person to also weigh in and give us what you think your priority areas should be in terms of actions in the next couple of months. So maybe I will ask you, Mr. Rafael Mariano, to give us what your recommendations are for the next coming months.
Thank you very much. I think in terms of the coming months, we are trying to frame our actions in terms of the activities that are going to be taking place in the next few months before the end of the year in the energy sector. And here I would cite a couple, just a couple, which are important, where we can make some interesting contributions. The first is in October, end of October. We are going to be hosting, together with the government of the United States, a quadrennial conference on nuclear energy, which is an event that takes place at regular intervals. And this time is going to be in Washington, so it's going to be a very interesting opportunity. There's going to be a lot of attention because there's a new administration there and perspective coming out. And there, as a co-organizer with the United States, we are planning to have specific segments in that conference with every country that is interested in nuclear energy. As you know, there are 32 at the moment and 20 that are very actively studying nuclear power programs on top of that. So it's going to be 60 countries, more or less, including the leading economies and emerging from the global south. So I think it's going to be a very topical moment, a critical moment in the calendar this year, where we are going to have specific segments dealing with this. And the other, of course, where we are planning to be showcasing the contribution from the nuclear community is COP26 in Glasgow, which, as you know, is one of the major, I would say, rendezvous that we are going to have as an international family, dealing with one aspect, which is the climate change. And there we are going to be showing these examples that I mentioned in my previous answer, the fellowships, the programs that we are introducing in capacity building, especially in the developing world, to precisely give avenues and give opportunities to the young generation to participate in the debate and in the activities, not only the debate. As I was saying in the beginning, my impression is that we have enough of advocacy and repeating what is going wrong, and it's a time to do concrete things and to show what we are really doing to integrate more people that are representing of the diversity of the society. So the IAEA is going to be engaging. Just to give you also an example, we are very active working with the different chapters, you know, in the nuclear community. There is something called Women in Nuclear, which has chapters in almost every country, where young women, scientists and technologists get together and work together in order to facilitate their introduction to the work force around the world. So we are trying to help them in this regard. So our approach as a technical organization is very concrete. We try to go thin on policy advice, because I think there are many people around the world that have shaped the problem very clearly, and we try to contribute with solutions. So we hope that we are going to be working with some of you in Washington later in the year and in Glasgow. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those recommendations, and definitely I wanna give the floor now to Undersecretary to also give us, you know, what are your recommendations for the near future, especially given the fact that we've heard about the challenges, the barriers, what different organizations and countries are doing, and even having heard the impact of the pandemic to the youth. And for your purpose, I will especially highlight the fact that given the pandemic, the world has gone digital, and now access to electricity and internet is a very crucial thing, with energy being at the heart of development, sustainable development. What are some of the recommendations coming from your office in the near future as we forge on to a more sustainable energy future? Undersecretary.
So, COVID-19 pandemic represents a crisis of an unprecedented scale, magnitude and reach, which need to be addressed and transformed into an opportunity to be back better and greener, and pave the way for a more sustainable and just future. So the G20 Italian presidency and COP25 co-presidency with UK offer excellent multilateral frameworks to engage a global debate, promoting the inclusivity, empowerment, empowering the roles of women and youth to fully participate in promotion of policies that can guide the necessary energy transition. Energy, particularly clean technologies, represent an enabling factor for the economic development and sustainable recovery in the pandemic context, as an essential tool to promote inclusion in line with the objective of 2030 agenda. In this perspective, the availability of sustainable energy at fair costs represents a driver capability of generating inclusion and breaking down obstacles of entire social categories. In the upcoming weeks, Italian G20 presidency will engage member states on a recovery on energy sectors that leaves no one behind and ensures access to reliable and clean energy for everyone. In particular, the G20 Italian presidency will focus on sustainable recovery and opportunities offered by innovative technology solutions, resilient, smart and sustainable cities, green finance boost for an inclusive and sustainable recovery. Italy believes that in current energy transition scenario, international opportunities and synergies are crucial. Investing in energy transition will contribute to mitigate climate change and reduce vulnerabilities. Finally, I'm glad to inform that an important event dedicated to young generation, Youth for Climate Driving Ambitions, will be organized in Milan on October 2021 as a side event of the pre-COP26.
so much, Under Secretary General, for those recommendations. And it's very inspiring. We look forward to actually going into the decade of action with actually implementing some of the things that we have been talking about for a very long time. One of our panelists said that the time for advocacy has come to an end, and now it's time for action. And in that spirit, I want to invite Ms. Amani Abu Zaid, Commissioner for Infrastructure and Energy from the African Union. Give us your recommendation, especially for the I speak as a child of the continent, and I do understand that the COVID-19 pandemic has worsened problems, not only for the world, but even for us young Africans, especially young Africans within the sustainable energy sector. What are your recommendations in the next coming month to limit the gap for climate action, inclusive climate action, but also a more inclusive green recovery that can benefit both women and the youth from the continent?
Thank you, Pasia. And indeed, I mean, the implications of COVID-19 in Africa are huge. It's and very serious. And it's not necessarily about the numbers of fatalities, which is still tragic, but it's true, it's less than other parts of the world. But the number of livelihoods lost is tremendous. And many, as someone said, I mean, the small, medium, and micro enterprises have been particularly hit. And remember that economies, sometimes 60 to 70% of our economies are informal sectors, and who are employed, the majority of those who are employed in the informal sectors, women and youth. So the implications are very serious and not always cannot always be quantified. So at the African Union, we have devised from day one, actually, I mean, the continent came together in an expression of solidarity unmatched, I think, worldwide, to come up with an emergency strategy that to support the countries, to support the sectors that have been particularly hit, to provide health guidance to everyone, to allow life to continue, but in a much more cautious and safe way. And also the Africa has established under the African Union a COVID-19 fund in which all countries have contributed, and we are also mobilizing international financial support to implement the strategy. The strategy for the containment and the recovery from post-COVID-19 put women and youth at the center of it, and we have identified things like renewable energy, especially in rural areas, for health centers as a priority. Because what we found is that 1 in 4 health centers in Africa have reliable sources of energy. So decentralized units, mini and off grids, are being doubled, particularly, as I said, in rural areas, and more specifically for health centers, in order to address, the emergencies, the health emergencies. Digitalization, I talked about it again, is the serious opportunity for the continent. And the same as we talk about the negative implications, the COVID-19 has made the case and have became the single accelerator of digitalization in the continent, a continent that already has made big strides in digitalization, sometimes ahead of many other parts of the world. And the underlying infrastructure for digitalization is definitely energy. That, of course, in addition to all the current work that I alluded to in my intervention, the large programs for energy across the continent, particularly renewable energy, as well as the empowerment and the policies for women inclusion in STEM, and the African Network for Women in Infrastructure, and many other initiatives. And I thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amani, for that. And then finally, I want to bring it back to you, Vladimir. Just briefly give us your recommendations at this point, and then we'll finally close this session with Ms. Baber. And thank you for the patience. So Vladimir, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Pasi. So due to our time constraints, I will focus primarily on 2 points. Point number one, even though a lot of money from stimulus packages, particularly in developed countries, has already been wasted on fossil fuel subsidies, and those money we will not recover, and moreover, we as youth and our children will be repaying those investments because most of them were made on borrowed money, it's not yet too late to prepare packages that will particularly focus on green jobs, because those will be mostly about investing in the jobs for people who are only coming into them right now from the universities, from high schools, from vocational schools, and so on. That's why it is extremely important that any further stimulus packages prioritize green jobs and opportunities for a proper training for those green jobs. And here, the investments in connectivity, the opportunities to reduce inequality to internet access, both for the purpose of receiving quality education and networking for career purposes, are extremely important. Because what we have seen, not just in the energy sector, but in other sectors in climate action prior to COVID, is that when it comes to career networking, there are two tendencies that we need to combat. Number one is we see men hire men, and number two is that when there are opportunities at the very bottom of the ladder, at the very beginning, unpaid internships still make a lot of difference, which means that apart from it being youth and gender issue, it is also a class issue, and we need to be mindful of that. And as a final remark, I would like also to point your attention to the fact that not just me, but our whole UN Secretary General's Youth Advisory Group on Climate Change prepared their own recommendations and remarks to the decision makers for 2021 in our 2020 outcome report that we launched as a recognition of the half year of the work we have already done in our mandate. I have just posted it in the comments, and you can see the whole overview of our proposals there. And we will be there for you, for the fellow youth, in 2021 as well. And thank you very much for being offered this opportunity.
Slav, for those recommendations. And finally, Ms. Barbara, I give you the floor to give us what your recommendation for us is and priority areas for the next couple of months towards building a sustainable energy future that's inclusive for all. So, Ms. Barbara.
So I just I cannot really add a lot of what Vladislav already said. We really need to concentrate now on the young people, that they also choose the right profession. Now I say it really a little bit provocative. We don't need more lawyers. We might not need more finance people. We might really need more people who understand about digitalization and how engineering works. So I think it's really a mandate for us to really concentrate on high schools, that those who are graduating from high schools also go into the scientist direction. And the other point, I think that the private sector really needs to foster more young talents, in the sense of, I give you an example. In Schneider Electric, we have a platform where we let some of our young talents create startups. Now we have a very successful startup in Australia, which is making a prosumer setup together with solar, and it's led by a young woman, 28 years old. And she's doing this now since 1.5 years, and she's doing a very great job. And these kind of platforms, we need more. I think when I'm thinking back now, I'm 50 years old, and I got really a lot of chances when I was very young. And I think we should give more chances to young people to go into risky things, to really stretch them, to even let them fail sometimes, but that's really now necessary so that we get a step forward in this direction.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for that. And obviously, when it comes to energy, it is a multifaceted sector at the end of the day. So obviously, we already said that energy is at the core of sustainable development, which encompasses a lot more. So it's an opportunity to bring the whole system in the room to work towards building the future. And I want to give this opportunity to my co-moderator, as I thank you all for this amazing session, to just introduce us to the next session. And it was an absolute pleasure having this conversation with all of you, and thank you. And we hope to continue the conversations beyond this platform, and we hope when we do reach out to you as young people, you will be responsive and willing to work together with us. and thank you. So Irene, I give it to you to usher us into the final segment of this high-level session.
Thank you very much, Pasi, and let me join you in thanking all the panelists for their involvement, for their passion, for their knowledgeability, and for their commitment to making this transition more inclusive in terms of women and in terms of youth. I think the final element of this dialogue is really dedicated to that. I understand that Tarek Mterai will come on now. Here he is. Tarek, hello, welcome. You are the director of the energy department at UNIDO, and I think you will present to us now a call to action so that we can build on all the analysis, on all the understanding, on all the in-depth knowledge of the obstacles, and move beyond that and really get change going in measurable ways, in ways that can be people and partners and organizations and stakeholders can be held accountable for. Please, Tarek.
First, allow me to thank our distinguished speakers, moderators, and all the contributors to the 2 days of activities and dialogue that has taken place under this session. So on behalf of UNIDO and the team at the Department of Energy, I extend my sincere appreciation and thanks to all who contributed to this important dialogue on empowerment and advancement of women and youth leadership in the clean energy transition. I think we have seen from the conversation that there are a number of important areas that we need urgent action on. And as we capture these in a call to action, let me just bring to you the key thematic areas where urgent action is needed. The call to action, I have identified 8 key areas where we need to really work on to collectively with all the partners, the government, civil societies, academia, and the private sector. And so these 3 areas include the need to bridge the education gap, the need to bridge the gender digital divide, the need to enhance engagement and career advancement avenues for women and youth into the clean energy, and the urgency for inclusive policies across sectors, and of course the importance of engaging around responsible investment and procurement to provide equal access and affordable financial mechanism for the participation of youth and women. Ownership of asset has been identified as key area to focus on, and the importance also of social norms, where we need to also ensure that the equality and inclusion in the clean energy transit is not just a women's issue, but it's everyone's responsibility. And finally, an emphasis need to be put on results accounting and monitoring, and ensuring that we have adequate tools, targets, and metrics to track gender mainstreaming and youth engagement and an equitable access. And of course, a mechanism to enforce that regulations and transparent reporting takes place in ensuring the empowerment of an equitable participation of women and youth leadership in the clean energy transition. Having said that, I think the partners will work to build on this session's outcome. We also in UNIDO commit to working with you on this, on these outcomes and the call to action, and we will develop a campaign with specific targets and associated target framework. We look forward to launching the campaign at the Vienna Energy Forum in July 2021. So we are inviting all governments, organizations, and individuals wanting to contribute to the campaign to write to the Vienna Energy Forum at unido.org. With this, I thank you all and wish you best of luck, and looking forward to seeing you at the Vienna Energy Forum in July of this year.